Welcome everyone. My name is Mark Daly. I help Fourroux with the marketing and the branding of the company. I'm here with Keith, and we're here to talk a little bit about Fourroux, where you've been in the past, where you are today, and where you plan on going in the future. Hi Keith.
Hey man, what's going on?
Before I thought we'd start that, I thought it would be a good idea for you to tell a little bit about how you got into Fourroux. You've been with Fourroux for how long now?
25 years. This is number 25 for me.
25.
September 1994. September 19th, 1994 is when I started.
Okay.
Yeah. And I remember the day that I interviewed with Fourroux. Fourroux was on Governor's Drive. It was a little shotgun building, one story. It was about 5,000 square feet at the time.
Yep.
They did orthotics, prosthetics, mastectomy, shoe inserts, soft back braces, off-the-shelf orthotic, any type of thing you could fit on the body, Fourroux did at the time. Anyway, I was in my early 20s and I had my coat and tie and showed up at the door and knocked on the door. Of course, it was early. It was about 7:30 in the morning. They didn't open until 8:30. And I had driven from Knoxville because that's where I went to school. And a German lady met me at the door, and I stood there and said, hey, I'm Keith, and I'm here to interview for the technical position. And she said, you're here to interview for a job, with a really thick guttural accent. And I said, yes, ma'am. She said, run for your life.
New approach.
Yeah, well, I should have maybe heeded that warning, but yeah, no, this is a 25th year, and there's been a ton of change over that series of years. There's been a ton of people that have changed. We've turned over our personnel multiple times. Mm-hmm. We've been very, very lucky, very blessed in the people that we have, especially recently in the recent years. But we went through some changes early, and I didn't really know what I was getting into. I came to Fourroux with a Bachelor's of Science degree, and I thought at one time I was headed to physical therapy school. Yeah. And while I was working in Knoxville, I figured out that physical therapy was really rewarding, but it was repetitive and it seemed kind of confining to me. I met a guy that did prosthetics because he came in and out of Fort Sanders Regional where I was working, and I talked to him and started kind of tagging along and shadowing him when he was there. And I tell you, I fell in love with the physics, the biomechanics, the psychology behind amputation, amputee rehab, amputee development, and the relationships that are formed, one-on-one personal relationships. And I headed toward prosthetics. Yeah. With everything that I had. Now, then and still now, prosthetics and orthotics are kind of linked. They're linked now in education, and they weren't technically linked when I went to school. But the conventional wisdom was get prosthetics and orthotics because we are orthotics and prosthetics profession. That's still how we're deemed and how we're labeled. Right. And we actually are, part of the durable medical equipment in the payer system, although we have absolutely nothing to do with durable medical equipment. And from my perspective, prosthetics and orthotics couldn't be any more different, any more dissimilar, just because of the psychology behind it. When an amputee comes to you for help, they likely will be with you unless you do something, or unless they move or pass away. They'll be with you for a long, long time, and you've just forged this long-term, lasting relationship. And they rely on you. I mean, you have to provide them tools and counseling and things that help them get back to work, get back to their life. In orthotics, it wasn't like that. We just were providing braces to people that really didn't want them. They didn't think that they needed them, and they were most often short-term. Back braces, knee braces, and then they would go to surgery. Right. The most long-term were stroke patients. And that's probably the most similar and dynamic because the person will need that device likely for the rest of their life. But that's where the similarity ends in prosthetics and orthotics.
Okay, so I heard you say when you first started at Fourroux that when you knocked on the door, you were applying for a technician job.
Yep. Yep, that's true. So after 4.5 years as an undergrad, I left there with a Bachelor of Science degree with a minor in psychology, and I was looking for a $6 an hour tech position.
Right.
But and I talked to my folks about the prospect of moving to Alabama, and to their credit, they and it probably has to do with just the way that they raised me growing up. They knew that I could eat bologna for an extended period of time and live on a little, because this was what I was really passionate about, and still am, to the core. And so it didn't really matter. If I could have just survived long enough to eat and live and find an apartment, it really didn't matter what I was paid or if I was paid.
Yeah.
I wanted in really, really bad. And it was difficult I tried to get into Fourroux in Knoxville, and went in and talked to Carl Fourroux, who was a certified practitioner at the time, and he and some of his staff, and I was in between a rock and a hard place because I had no experience, therefore I couldn't get a job. But I couldn't get any experience without having a job, so there I was. And so
most new graduates.
Yeah, most new grads,
Yeah.
you have an expectation of what you think you're capable of. And I just took a right turn and found a guy in Alabama through another practitioner in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
And just took a chance.
So were there as many facilities back then to choose from? I mean,
Yeah.
were there multiple ones in each city, or?
Yeah, so back this is 1993, right? There weren't. It wasn't Hanger. It was NovaCare, and it was transitioning ownership from NovaCare to Hanger, and so it was not the size at all what it is today. It was probably a few hundred facilities that had kind of banded together, that had been bought and rolled up. But that was the main threat or the main competition. But still, it was all orthotics, all prosthetics, all the stuff. That's what everyone did. I found out about Fourroux through a practitioner in Chattanooga, who Marvin Fourroux was helping to start up his business. And he was an adjunct professor. I heard him speak, asked him, how do I get involved? And he said, man, I'm just starting my business. I don't have anything for you. And I'm like, well, I've heard this over and over. He said, but my partner in Alabama. I was like, Alabama? I'm like, yeah, I'm coming from Tennessee, God's country. I don't need to move to Alabama but I went down there and talked to them, or just introduced myself, and found that there was some opportunity there that didn't have anywhere else. Now, yeah, it meant that I had to start from the bottom, which is the right way to do it. I know that practitioners come in from all walks of life and with all types of training and kind of make lateral moves or move up into companies. From my perspective, it is and always has been the best way to learn from the ground up. Because if you do become a certified clinician, you've gone through the technical wares, you've made all the technical errors that you can possibly make, so you know and respect your technician and their time, and you don't want to create more work for them. If you haven't gone through that, you don't necessarily have the pain and painful memories of having to redo your own mistakes and then having to redo someone else's mistakes. So if you come up that way, it gives you a sense of clarity, and it helps you become a better clinician.
So was the schooling vastly different from how you practiced?
Yes.
When you started, like it is today?
Yeah, the schooling has nothing to do with the way you practice.
Right.
I mean, it really didn't then, doesn't now, and
so it's very important then to find a facility which you don't know at the time, but maybe is a little more progressive, because there are facilities still stuck using.
I mean, most facilities are still stuck in the hands-on by hand method.
Right.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
But there are better ways and there are faster ways. And when your sole focus and your sole concentration is to better the amputee's life, that means that you have to do better for them, do it more quickly, and train people to do it so that you're not the only one that knows how to do it.
Right.
That's a challenge when it's a hands-on method, because you have to really invest one-on-one in another clinician in hopes that they have the same technical ability that you do, the same care for patients that you do, and they're not going to, in 5 years, make a left and walk out the door. Big challenge in a conventional orthotic and prosthetic practice. You know, and we worked a long time on the methodology, and we worked on the patents and the technology that we have, so that we could deliver a better product to a patient much more rapidly and have it be less subjective, have it be much more objective, so that it's easier to train, easier to learn, and much more repeatable than a hands-on method. I think it was in around 97, it was 97, 99, that we bought our first carver, 98, 99. We were convinced we could make it work, so we invested the hundreds of thousands of dollars, even back then, into the CAD equipment. I think at one time we had 6 scanners, 2 full-size carvers, and they were running, because we did everything from body jackets to above-knee soft covers on those carvers. Yep. And we had multiple bits, and we had it down to clockwork. And we had several technicians in the process. But now we were doing orthotics and prosthetics. It looked like a beehive back in those days. I would like to say it was organized chaos. I'd stress chaos over organized chaos.
So some of that is procedural. How were you focused in at that time on like the customer, other than the fit and the product that you were providing?
To be quite honest with you, it was hard. It's hard to focus on a customer, because with all of the orthotics, all of the volume in lower extremity, spinal, and then, oh, by the way, you have 3 hospital calls waiting, and they have to go home today. And an outpatient rehab has 2 things that you have to see. The challenge is to give everybody the attention that they came there for, and not miss something. Right. And I'll be honest with you, it was a challenge. Right. And I know we missed things, and I know we didn't compromise care, but we did the best that we could under those circumstances. Right. And that really, Mark, is one of the things that led us to thinking through why we were doing orthotics and prosthetics and hospital call, because they're so different, and there's such a different market, and it takes so much more mental energy to do all of those things, and you can't focus and get really, really good on one. We moved into our new building, and we moved into our new building. We decided we were going to pull out of the hospital contract, which was a lot of work. We decided that we were going to pull out of orthotics. By pull out, I mean gradually ease out of it. Now, we had a great orthotic practitioner who continued to practice in that business that we divested Fourroux from for years, and he actually retired out of that business, and up to his retirement was doing a phenomenal job for orthotic patients. That was his passion. That always had been his passion, and it was not ours. It was not the direction that the Fourroux company needed to go in order to serve the right patient population and in order to grow. I told you we needed to find the right people, and the right people are different in orthotics than they are in prosthetics. They just are. They're different from the DNA level. They come up different. They have different sense of purpose. And so we have to look for people that are going to be best suited for prosthetics and for amputee rehabilitation, and to care for people for tens of years or for their entire lifetime. Those people are cut from a different cloth. So that was the challenge. Yeah. And so 2011 is when I acquired in whole the second 50% of the company, and that was a big deal. It was a very big deal for me, because everybody that knows me understands that I tend to micromanage overmanage and stick my nose into stuff that should have been left alone. And that's still an ongoing challenge for me. What I realize now in 2019 versus 2011 or versus 2005 or versus 1994 is, although I'm not doing it, I can do so much more by giving people freedom to do what they're best at. All I really have to do is to find and help hire and train and give the right people resources and then let them do what they're good at. That requires training. We've got people in there that have trained over and over and over and have trained some of the best clinicians that you'll ever meet. Some of the best clinicians and clinical staff members that exist in prosthetics are at Fourroux. I can tell you that because I know a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And I put our guys up and gals up against anybody, and regardless of the size of their operation, the depth of their operation, or no matter how quickly they move.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and stay tuned.